The Battle of the Philippine Sea. At the time, the Americans doubted their performance, but history shows a decisive U.S. victory. The battle began early in the morning on June 19th. At 0540 hours, 10 minutes after launching, an American search plane from Monterey tangles with two Japanese search planes and promptly shoots one of them down. 10 minutes later, an armed search plane out of Guam takes on the destroyer Stockholm, dropping a small bomb that misses. Quick shooting by destroyer Yarnall takes the bandit out of the action. At 0824 hours, the Japanese launch an offensive from Orote Field, despite the Americans' presence over the island. Bloody dogfights rage for nearly an hour over Orote Field. The U.S. shoots down 35 Japanese aircraft, but when they depart, Japanese planes are still taking off. The first carrier-based planes sent to attack the U.S. fleet are launched from Chitose, Zuiho, and Chiyoda at 0830 hours. The force is made up of 16 Zeke fighters, 45 Zekes armed with bombs, and 8 Jills loaded with torpedoes. The largest Japanese attack force, 53 Judy bombers, 27 Jill torpedo bombers, and 48 Zeke fighters, begins leaving the decks of Taiho, Shokaku, and Zuikaku at 0856 hours. The size of this force indicates the Japanese mean business. "13 minutes after detecting the Japanese raiders, a group of fighter planes is launched from U.S. carriers. The Japanese had a significant advantage in wind direction on 19 June. Admiral Spruance was forced to constantly change his carrier's direction to face into the wind for launches, preventing him from making up any ground on the Japanese fleet. The Japanese stayed just out of American search plane range. 10:36 hours. The Japanese force is no match for their American counterparts. In a series of chilling dogfights, the U.S. fighters take out many Japanese attackers before they can launch their torpedoes. At 10:40 hours, a strike force of 36 planes leaves Hornet to join Hellcats from the carrier Lexington in patrolling over Guam and Rota. At 10:49 hours, the Japanese Raid 1 planes are able to score their first strike as the bombers attack Yarnall, Stockholm, and South Dakota. South Dakota is struck by a direct hit that kills 23 men, but the bomb fails to slow the ship or affect its fighting capability. This is the only hit the Japanese will make all day. Beginning at 1100 hours, an 82-plane attack force, 30 fighters, 9 Judys, 27 Vals, 10 Zeke fighter bombers, and 6 Jills, leaves the decks of Junyo, Hiyo, Ryuho, and Zuikaku. Destination, the American fleet. The Japanese second raid comes into radar contact and are met by an interception force of Hellcats at 11:39 hours. 70 of the Japanese planes are shot down before they can reach the targets. At 11:45 hours, 20 surviving planes from the Raid 2 attack force get past the interceptors and attack U.S. ships Alabama, South Dakota, Stockholm, Indiana, and Iowa. Except for a kamikaze dive into the Indiana, which causes little damage, the ships get away clean. No hits for the Japanese. The remaining Raid 2 planes launch attacks against the American carrier force at 1200 hours. Bombs are dropped on Wasp, Bunker Hill, Enterprise, and Princeton. Again, the Japanese fail to score any direct hits. 2 near misses on runs at Bunker Hill cause minor damage, and a bomb that explodes overhead Wasp claims 1 life. This attack essentially ends the Japanese Raid 2, with losses totaling 97 planes. At 12:20 hours, the U.S. submarine Kavala fires 6 torpedoes at Shokaku. 3 of the torpedoes strike the carrier, rupturing fuel tanks and starting fires. At 1300 hours, SBDs from Lexington bomb Orote Field. The bombs damage some grounded Japanese planes, but the airfield is not affected. Also at 1300 hours, 40 Hellcats greet Raid 3 50 miles from the U.S. ships. The Japanese lose 7 of their attackers. The few Raid 3 planes that aren't shot down or haven't turned back attack Admiral Harrell's ships at 1320 hours. Like most of the Japanese attacks this day, no hits are recorded. At 1359 hours, Helldivers from Essex bomb Orote Field, ruining the airstrip. A tragedy for the Japanese, since 49 planes from Raid 4 are on their way with no place else to land. The Americans lose 6 Hellcats and a bomber in this raid, almost a quarter of the 29 planes lost the whole day by the U.S. The Japanese air coordinator turned out to be America's best ally during the 4 raids of 19 June. The American flag communicators were able to pick up his broadcast early in the day, translate his orders, and react accordingly. On several occasions, American planes began to attack him, but were called off. Out of gratitude for his unintended help, American fighters allowed him to fly home. At 1423 hours, a small group of planes from Raid 4 attacks the carriers Wasp and Bunker Hill. The Japanese don't fare well in this attack. They don't score a hit, and all but one of their planes are shot down. At 1449 hours, 49 of the Raid 4 planes attempting to land on Guam and Rota are spotted by 27 Hellcats. The result? 30 Japanese planes are shot down, the other 19 damaged beyond repair. Of the 82 planes launched in Raid 4, only 9 can still fly. At 1501 hours, fires on Shokaku spread to her bomb magazine. The explosion there literally blows the Shokaku to pieces, and she sinks. At 1532 hours, Taiho's armored flight deck becomes her undoing. Gasoline fumes down below ignite, but the top of the ship is so strong that the explosion blows out her sides. Because the original torpedo damage was not considered serious, the crew is not prepared to abandon ship. Within 2 hours, the ship sinks, taking over 1,600 of her crew to a watery grave. The U.S. launches an all-out attack force at 1621 hours on June 20th. 11 U.S. carriers launched 216 planes in all, 85 fighters, 77 dive bombers, and 54 torpedo bombers. Because night will be falling by the time they reach the Japanese fleet, this will be the only attack force they can launch this day. At 1840 hours, no less than 7 different attacks on Japanese ships occur simultaneously. Dive bombers from Wasp attack the oilers Genyo and Seiyo Maru. Both oilers, completely defenseless, are damaged so badly they later have to be abandoned and scuttled. Carrier Hiyo is one of the ships attacked at 1840. Good shooting from Yorktown Avengers put 2 torpedoes in her, hits which will ultimately prove to be fatal. Also at 1840, Avengers from Enterprise, carrying bombs, not torpedoes, attack Ryuho. Although the bombers claim 8 hits, they do little damage. Ryuho lives to fight another day. Apparently, the U.S. was still somewhat cautious over the use of torpedo planes, given the disastrous outcome of Midway for planes of that kind. Many of the torpedo planes sent out on the 20th were armed with light bombs and not torpedoes. Had many of these planes been equipped with torpedoes, 2 more carriers would probably have been sunk. Carrier Zuikaku is the object of much attention at 1840 hours. Dive bombers and torpedo planes from 4 different carriers attack her, landing 2 direct hits and 5 near misses. An abandoned ship order is given, but when damage control crews are able to bring the flames under control, Zuikaku is spared. Again. A group of Hellcats and Avengers from a trio of American carriers take on the Chiyoda group at 1840 hours, striking the carrier once and destroying her flight deck. Haruna is also hit once, and Maya absorbs a near miss. All 3 ships are damaged, but repairable. At 2040 hours, 2 hours after she was attacked and hit, the carrier Hiyo sinks. Clearly, this battle was the most one-sided battle of the war. The Japanese carrier force lost 426 out of 461 planes, compared to American losses of 130 planes, 80 of which were lost in night retrieval, not in battle. The Japanese lost 2 carriers and 2 oilers, and countless others received damage. No American ship was lost, and the few that received any damage at all did not have to be removed from the fleet. It was obvious to American fighters, after the Turkey shoot of 19 June, that the Japanese now had to resort to inexperienced pilots. Many of the Japanese pilots actually appeared to try to stay out of the battles, and their attacks on ships were half-hearted at best. After this battle, the Japanese were never again able to mount any sort of carrier force, which meant that they could no longer present any kind of advanced fleet. The Americans did some second-guessing right after the battle, asking why night searches weren't conducted the evening of the 19th and early hours of the 20th, and why the Japanese weren't pursued more aggressively in the days following the battle. But this was a great victory for the U.S.